So welcome everyone behind the theme. Today we're talking about Sekigahara again, and today we'll be focusing on the events preceding the battle itself. Trust me, there's a lot of really cool and interesting events, considering that Sekigahara is not a battle like Agincourt is one big battle. It's Sekigahara most of the time is talked about from the period of July all the way to October 1600, and all the events that kind of happen in between that leads to the battle itself. Because if you were just to read the battle itself, it sounds like a battle, but actually there was a lot of underlying reasons why a lot of generals in the battle did things, which is why I said I really feel that the theme truly comes out when you know the history, comes out in the game theme and mechanics. From the last episode, we set up all the events basically leading up to the pressure cooker that has led to true aggression between the two factions of Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari. Ishida Mitsunari now being known as the Western Army, and Tokugawa and his forces being known as the Eastern Army. So let's get into it. Now continuing, let's start with the basic main plans for both armies, Ishida Mitsunari and the Western Army. The idea was basically pretty simple, that Uesugi Kagegatsu would drag Tokugawa and his army, main force, towards the east, hold them there, and fight them, hopefully weaken them and hopefully defeat them. And if not, by then, Mitsunari would then gather his main force, come towards the east, and basically catch Tokugawa in a pincer and defeat him. And it's basically a simple pincer movement action of basically the whole of Japan, which again is very narrow geography, really lends to the idea. And also the lack of navies in that period of warfare. Now the main plan for Tokugawa Ieyasu was a lot more adaptable, as much as Ishida Mitsunari's plan was simple. The issue was, of course, that at the time, no one could really say that whether Tokugawa Ieyasu or Ishida Mitsunari would succeed. So the loyalties of all these daimyo were still very much in the air. Tokugawa himself wanted to take things slow and make sure that he consolidated his position. One reason why is you can see how slowly he moved towards the east. On his way east, basically he only had a few thousand men. And it took him about 10 days to get to Edo. Whereas when he took 30,000 men later on back towards the west, he basically took the same track but in 2 weeks. His main idea was basically that his two generals, Date Masamune, the One-Eyed Dragon, and Yoshiakira will hold in the east Uesugi Kagegatsu, and depending on what happens in the east, then reacts to how to deal with the situation in the west. This is abundantly clear when he reached basically Edo. He takes 50,000 men and moves to Oyama Castle, and then seeing that Uesugi himself was contained by these two generals, takes the rest of the army, splits his army between himself taking the Tokaido road with 30,000 men and giving his son Hidetada 40,000 men going to the Nakasendo road in the north. They will meet up and defeat the Western army. Basically to move towards the west, sweep up any enemies you can, if not at least make sure they're covered, for example castles and everything, make sure that at least the garrisons in there stay inside the castle and don't affect supply lines, and defeat most importantly the army that matters, which was Ishida Mitsunari. And that was why his plan was actually to move towards the east, and then the main goals were either to take Osaka or Sawayama, which was the castle of Ishida Mitsunari. Because the minute he took out Ishida Mitsunari's power base, he knew that these daimyos were fractured, and then the alliance against him basically would break down. And in general, the history does prove that Tokugawa's forces were much more consolidated in his person and trusted him a lot more than Ishida Mitsunari's army. Now that we heard both battle plans, the most important thing that happened preceding is the involvement of the Mori clan. This is, in fact, you can see this in the board game itself, where the Mori blocks are on several special positions on the board. And that is because once hostilities started, the consolidation of support was still very much in the air, and Ishida Mitsunari did not have the clout or the strength of army to bring in support. Now Uesugi is already where he is, he could not really rely on using that strength to fight situations in the west of Japan. So he needed someone there already. Now he couldn't use the Maeda clan, because if you saw the last episode on the setup on the history, the Maeda clan basically had turned to Tokugawa when Ishida Mitsunari tried to get them involved in the plot against Tokugawa, and they knew it was not to their interest. On top of that, the Maeda clan their great leader, Toshie, had basically died, and his land split between his sons, and thus the clan itself was somewhat weakened. So he had to turn to another power. The other power obviously is one of the other guardians of Hideyori, which was the Mori clan. Now the Mori clan was a great clan at that point, in a simple kind of saying that they had, where they said that Tokugawa could build a road of rice from his lands all the way to the capital. But for Mori, he could build a bridge of gold and silver from his land to the capital. Now, that being said, Tokugawa was still far richer at 2.5 million koku in revenue, whereby Mori was basically earning about 1.2, but that's still a lot. So Mori Terumoto, the leader of the Mori clan, basically still had a lot of influence. And so Ishida Mitsunari needed to bank on that. And he went to court Mori Terumoto. And strange enough, when hostilities broke out, Mori Terumoto actually wanted to turn to Ieyasu, but under a lot of advice from several advisors and emissaries and all, he decided then to bank everything on the Totoyomi cause and join Ishida Mitsunari. But of course, there was a trade-in. Mori was not going to join under Ishida Mitsunari. So in the deal, it was pretty weird because Mori would be the official head of the resistance against Tokugawa. But Ishida Mitsunari, in practical fact, would still be leader. Meaning he was the one that would direct battles, lead battles and all. And this is really ironic, is because Mori Terumoto, the leader, will be in Osaka Castle, leading and heading the operations, so to speak. While Ishida Mitsunari will lead into the fighting and everything. And it's ironic because in terms of administration, one could definitely argue that Ishida Mitsunari was better at that. But for leading battles and soldiers, Mori Terumoto was very well known as a good general since the Korean campaign. So they basically had switched roles for what they were good at. And it's this situation, if you see the board game, that you notice that a lot of the Mori forces are basically held in reserve on the board. And also that's why you see it's so hard to deploy Mori troops in the board game. It's because of this weird situation where many of the Mori generals felt slighted, that in practical fact why their lord was not only the official head of the resistance, but also leading it. And that's why you see a lot of the Mori generals on there were very slow to move, and a lot of the Mori generals would not even fight for Ishida Mitsunari because of this slight, unless they were attacked first by Tokugawa. So basically, even though Mitsunari had set up a good situation with her, you can see that he set up a situation whereby, out of self-interest, he was undermining his own position in his own army. With the less known fact about the battle plans, the main event that affected it. So next time we'll talk about other more interesting facts.